Hello and welcome to News in Depth here on TVP World. I'm your host, Marie Kato. Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan has wrapped up a significant two-day official visit to Poland, a trip that could signal an important shift in Armenia's foreign policy direction. As Yerevan reassesses its long-standing alliances and explores deeper engagement with the West, Warsaw became a key stop on that journey. And our very own Diana Skaya was on the ground throughout the visit and joins me now in the studio with exclusive insights. Welcome, Diana. Great to be with you.
Great to be with you too, Maria. Thank you. I'm happy to be discussing this topic today.
Absolutely. You're the expert. So, like I said in our intro, you spent the last 2 days following and covering the Armenian Prime Minister's trip to Warsaw. Tell us about how that trip unfolded and what brought the Prime Minister to Warsaw specifically at this particular moment.
Right. Well, it was nice to see the Armenian Prime Minister visiting Poland. First of all, it was the first time that such the biggest head of state, right, the highest person at the head of state of Armenia, makes a trip to Poland in years, right, in years. Now, in a nutshell, before going into the details of what went down, first of all, his Nikol Pashinyan's visit began with a lecture that he gave at the Polish Institute of International Affairs to a room full of diplomats, including the Turkish ambassador was there, the Armenian ambassador was there, after which he then met with active members of the Armenian community in Poland. It was a closed meeting, of course, I mean, to the point where no phones were allowed, no watches, Marie, were allowed as well.
Why was that?
Tight, very, very tight security, but I think we can get into that a little bit later. And then the next day, on the 26th of February, yesterday, the Polish Prime Minister greeted Nikol Pashinyan, and Armenian Foreign Minister Ararat Mirzoyan signed a new defense pact with Poland's Defense Minister, Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz, where to be more specific, it's a new military technical cooperation agreement that was aimed at strengthening defense ties between Armenia and Poland, the exchange of cooperation in scientific research and military equipment as well.
So the speech at the Polish Institute of International Affairs, you say, lasted almost an hour. It almost sounds like it was off the record. What were the key takeaways?
Well, first of all, TVP World was the only media that was present there, aside from the Armenian press that had traveled with the Armenian delegation, with Pashinyan's delegation. Now, honestly, let's be honest, Maria, Armenia is heading into parliamentary elections in June. So on one end, we could take it as Nikol Pashinyan doing maybe a Euro trip or trying to really strengthening these ties with the European Union. And this is exactly what he affirmed. Now, one of the things that Nikol Pashinyan did say, and he was very, very specific on, he was very thankful to Poland for having been an extremely reliable partner to Armenia in helping with the democratic reforms in the country, right? In helping Armenia kind of, move up towards Western alliances, forming Western partnerships, and he really put the accent on that throughout his entire speech.
Would you say that Armenia considers Poland to be a role model of sorts in that regard?
He did thank Poland on that. I mean, listen, Armenia and Poland first established diplomatic relations on February 26, 1992. So his trip was significant, as 34 years later, on the date, Pashinyan visited Warsaw. Now, there was a soundbite. I don't know if we'll hear it or not, but what he did say, he was, I have a lot to thank Poland for, and we're discussing how also the European Union can be involved in the process of reestablishing regional communications. We hope that investments will come from the EU and member states, and we're concentrated to find new opportunities for Armenia to deepen our cooperation with the European Union. So in one nutshell, the key word for us as a takeaway was the word, partnerships, investments, integrating Armenia closer to the EU. Let's not forget, Armenia did begin the process of the legal process within the EU framework for accession to the European Union and took the first steps. Right?
Absolutely. We do have that soundbite that you were referring to. So let's see what Pashinyan had to say.
We have many things to learn from Poland. And of course, as I said, we are thankful for supporting us in the framework of European Union in bilateral level, etc. We are discussing how European Union could be involved in the process of the re-establishment of and opening of regional communications, and we hope that investments would come from European Union and member countries, member states. We are discussing how European Union could be involved in the process of the re-establishment of and opening of regional communications, and we hope that investments would come from European Union and member countries, member states, and we are concentrated to find new and new opportunities for Armenia to deepen our cooperation with the European Union and with member states.
That's really ambitious, a very packed statement there.
Ambitious is the right word to use
very,
for this Prime Minister, Marie.
Very ambitious. He sounds very, very determined. So the first thing that I wanted to ask you about was Armenia wants to seek closer business ties. He sounds very confident about the West, Europe investing in Armenia and vice versa. Can you tell me a little bit about what Pashinyan expects and sounds so confident about in terms of investment?
Well, confident, like I said, is a very perfect word to describe Nikol Pashinyan himself. You know, he has this presence about him. He speaks, he's ready. He thinks that people want to, you know, are ready to help him. And I guess it's a good trait to have in a leader. But now those specific words that he used, Marie, was, you know, we're looking for help, of course, with that opening of our railway and communications. Now, here what he's talking specifically about is this trip corridor, right? The Trump route for international peace and prosperity. Now, this was the peace declaration that was signed between Nikol Pashinyan and Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev, brokered by President Trump in Washington last August. Now, still, we don't have much details as to, you know, when it will actually begin. And the entire process. We do know, however, that the United States has already invested in that. We know J.D. Vance made a trip to Armenia and to Azerbaijan very, very recently to see that through. Now, essentially, what it's going to do, it's the Zangezur corridor, which is on Armenian territory, and it's a proposed transport route that would actually create a direct link from Azerbaijan, a link going through Armenia's southern province of Syunik, linking it to Azerbaijan's Nakhichevan exclave, which would then go to Turkey, and we're seeing that on the map right now, which will go to Turkey and essentially creating, and ultimately to Europe by rail, creating a new sort of east-west transit artery that could bypass Russia and Iran and strengthen regional connectivity. And that's exactly another thing, a factor that Pashinyan spoke about was, improving his relations with Turkey. He also talked about opening the land border with Turkey. Now the the skies are open, so you have direct flights that are flying in from Turkey to Armenia, but the border, the land border, does remain locked because of these years of and decades of conflict, right? So that's another thing he did mention. And we also, of course, and he's talking about inviting these EU, member states to help in that process. Let's not forget also, he mentioned how under his government, he did invite, following the Second Nagorno-Karabakh War, the European Union monitoring mission, which is established now along the border with Azerbaijan in Yeregnadzor, that monitors since 2023, if I'm not mistaken, that monitors actually both sides to make sure that things are smooth. If there are incidents, the monitoring mission will actually report to Brussels, hence to keep some kind of peace in the region.
But this trip corridor, once it kicks off, what does that actually mean for Armenia's relations with Russia, but also what does that mean for trade and its relationship with Europe?
Well, Marie, Armenia has been landlocked for decades, for over 3 decades, by a war with Azerbaijan, and not just any war, but a deadly war. So now you're seeing, this, and as I mentioned, this route would open. And we're talking about trade. You're talking about trains that Pashinyan said also, as of next year, reportedly, that trains from Azerbaijan are going to be entering Armenia. Now, there's already been goods that Azerbaijan has already exported to Armenia. Again, we're not hearing much about it, but this is something he said. Unfortunately, a lot of the Armenian population is not very still open to this. We are talking about decades of conflict. We're talking about blood. We're talking about loss, talking about military loss, right? So it's something that is very, very hard still for the Armenian population to accept, right? But this is the reality that's happening, right? Investments, AI, technology, many things on that front. And you asked about Russia. Well, it's interesting because, like I said, this corridor would actually be able to bypass, right? He also spoke about pipelines that would be going through this trip corridor, right? We're speaking about bypassing Russia. And Marie, Armenia's relations with Russia are really, imbalanced or balanced. It's very, very
volatile, perhaps.
Yes. And he did talk about, I will tell you, right away, it's very, very tricky because at this conference, three people, he was asked the question 3 times minimum about Armenia's relationship with Russia and how he reacts to it. And honestly, it's not really what the audience expected to hear. It's, if we can call it diplomatic, but I think we do have a soundbite on that. Let's hear it.
We are a close partner with Russia. And we have very strong economic ties, political ties, even though you know that we have frozen our participation in CSTO, and it was connected with some events that took place in 2022, because Armenia was disappointed in CSTO. Because having legal obligations, CSTO didn't react properly to the security challenges that Armenia had. But from the other side, we say that our relations with Russia now is under transformation. We now are creating new relations with Russia, but of course we determined and we would like to develop our relations with Russia, but definitely those relations are changing because of many factors. By the way, it is very important. It is very important to state that in the November of 2020, the role of Russia and Russian president was crucial in reaching ceasefire with Azerbaijan. Of course, afterwards, there's some misinterpretation of the signed document on the 8th of November emerged, and that's why it transformed into declaration that we adopted with Azerbaijan in Washington. But it is very important to state that on 8th of November, the role of Russia and personally Russian President Vladimir Putin was very important in reaching to the ceasefire agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan.
So on the one hand, Pashinyan says he's disappointed with Russia. On the other hand, he says he's thanking Putin. So there's a bit of contradiction here in terms of his attitude in regards to the relationship that the country has with Russia. So what's this about?
And very much Armenia still being polarized, right? That's the key word here. Again, elections, right? The country, Marie, is very, very divided, polarized into its relationship. Now, he's saying here, Pashinyan is saying here that, he's out of the CS. They're frozen, not completely out, but they've frozen their participation in the CSTO, which was supposed to protect Armenia and help Armenia in the Second Nagorno-Karabakh War. Meaning, there were Russian peacekeepers there that did absolutely nothing to help to oversee security, to help Armenians, like I'm in from Nagorno-Karabakh, in the deadly war that happened. And instead also what happened, over 120,000 ethnic Armenians, deported into Armenia proper by Azerbaijan after this war. So now this is something that Pashinyan has always said that he doesn't, forgive Putin for, and slowly he's, here on one end, he's also saying, listen, you're talking about a country that's been so heavily reliant on Russian gas, on Russian security for years, for decades. There's a huge Armenian population that lives and works in Russia as well, and might I mention wealthy Armenians that live there and that send back. So he can't just, overnight disconnect from his ties to Russia. Yet at the same time, even his choice of words, thanking, are very, very diplomatic. Very, very extremely diplomatic. I myself, after this, what isn't shown here is I asked him myself, is there no fear that Russians might be meddling into the elections in June? Something that we've seen happen in Moldova, in Ukraine, all over our region here, right? Georgia, look what took place in Georgia. And again, he replied very, very diplomatically. He didn't want to give me a concrete answer. He said instead, no, well, what can we do? It's just our job to make sure that we say the truth and that we're transparent and we have free and fair elections. He wouldn't say whether there is a fear. And Marie, I am telling you that about a couple of weeks ago, Armenia's foreign minister said that there's going to be an EU delegation who is going to oversee, or some kind of a system that will be implemented to try and avoid Russian hybrid attacks. This is something that Pashinyan did not mention himself.
Absolutely. And one final question as we wrap up. We know that Nikol Pashinyan met with Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk. Any takeaways from that you know of?
I was there. So they did sign, as I mentioned, Armenia's foreign minister signed a new defense military agreement with Poland's defense minister to expand their ties. There was even a video going around social media of Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk and Nikol Pashinyan, very, very friendly. Of course, Donald Tusk said that he actually congratulated Nikol Pashinyan on the way that he's been handling the peace process, and that he looks forward into being able to help Armenia in its democratic reforms, in its economy, in order for Armenia to take the right direction towards democracy. And it was, I believe, going forward, it will be a good deal, partnership for Armenia, and hopefully a new stage of flourishing relations between Poland and Armenia.
Okay, Diana Skaya, TVP World's on-site Armenia expert. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much, Marie.
And that's a wrap for News in Depth today. Make sure that you stay updated with TVP World, and there'll be lots more news and commentary this evening. Goodbye.